If I had a girl in the morning, a girl in the evening. This time we did Season 1, Episode 6, The Crawling Hand.
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your dead astronaut's hand is?
But first, some follow-up. Paul from Facebook pointed out that the apple has indeed been riffed, as RiffTrax has covered it at some point in their run.
At some point in their run, but apparently you cannot get it now. I just tried to find a link for that episode on RiffTrax's website, and it is not there. It is not available right now, so you'll have to find Paul from Facebook and see if he'll share his copy, I guess. So that's interesting. I didn't know that they had done that, or I'd forgotten it if I did know it. I'm gonna disagree with Beth's summary, because I have seen the apple and it's fantastic.
Yes.
And I don't think it would make for particularly good MST3K fodder at any point in their career. It's a really busy film. It's a really delightful film. It's an intentionally goofy film.
Mm-hmm.
It's campy. Like, that's not particularly strong MST3K material.
Now, Chris, you say that, and yet the movie, not only that we just talked about, but the movie that's one of your favorite episodes to introduce people with is Alien from LA.
Yeah, it's true. I think Alien from LA manages to it has a different type of camp. It's a little more subtle about it somehow. I mean, nothing is less subtle than the apple.
That's true. As I put it last episode, it is fueled entirely by cocaine and unearned ambition.
I did watch somebody put up a YouTube clip of some of the best bits from the RiffTrax version of the apple.
Mm-hmm.
And, unsurprisingly, Mike and the boys are not as excited about the camp over-the-top wonderfulness of this film. And there were a few sort of sexist and homophobic jokes, although they're mild for that, I suppose. But they're still there, and they still are great. But there was one really good joke. As you might remember, they're trying to give out little stickers to everybody to support BIM.
Yeah.
And at some point, one of the characters said, "Oh, it's mandatory to wear them now." And then one of the boys says, "Ever since Bimstel knocked." But that's good. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's a genuinely
funny joke.
Yeah.
Anyway, that exists. You might want to track it down if you want to, but I will recommend that you just go and watch the apple on its own. It's delightful.
Yeah. I mean, I would have loved for the Apple, or indeed other canon films, to have been riffed, say, sometime between seasons 2 through 7. But, that time has passed.
We have another piece of feedback from Matt from Reddit, who is interested in slaking your desperate lust for car on plane action.
Yes.
As we talked about 2 episodes ago, I believe, in the last chase, you're hungry to see a car driving into a plane and causing a big explosion on a runway. And Marty had suggested a scene from one of the Die Hard movies, is it?
Mm-hmm. The comically titled "Live Free or Die Hard."
That's right, in which a car sort of goes into the sky and hits a helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
But that was not good enough for you. And now Matt from Reddit reminds you that from this very show,
mm-hmm.
Mystery Science Theater 3000, in the episode Operation 0007, Season 5, Episode 8, there is in the beginning a scene in which a driverless car is remote controlled into a plane that's landing and smashes on the runway. And there's a big explosion. So is that going to do you? Will that satisfy your needs?
Well, I can't, I don't want to speak publicly about my needs, but I do think that this can potentially, Marty, you can retire for now in terms of going on that fact-finding mission about cars going into planes, because it looks like this is it. I remember really loving this episode, but I have not watched it in maybe a decade, so I completely blanked on this.
That is definitely a detail that I did not remember. I just went back and watched that scene again, and indeed, car without person hits plane.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the opening couple minutes of the episode, so check it out when you have a chance. See if it works. Maybe let us know next episode.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, I mean, you do know that I wanted to see the car go through the cockpit and like run over the pilot and all sorts of crazy things, and I don't think we get that.
No, unfortunately.
But it's close. It's a step in the right direction, and as predicted, it would come from Italian schlock.
Yes, exactly. But I think that's all we get to talk about fun stuff. Now we get to talk about the crawling hand.
Are you sure you just don't want to like catch up for the next hour instead of talking about the crawling hand? It would be fitting for this episode in a weird way.
It's we got to get to it.
All right. Well, here we go. Off to doldrums. Please don't unsubscribe if you listen to this episode.
This time we watched Season 1, Episode 6, The Crawling Hand. 2 astronauts went to the moon, and each died on the way back. The second one, though, asked for death on the way back because his body had been taken over by a murderous alien life force. Mission Control agrees to explode the spaceship all over California, where his disembodied hand is discovered by college student Paul. Paul takes the hand home, where it begins a half-hearted killing spree. First, killing Paul's eccentric landlord, Mrs. Hotchkiss. Then, a less successful attempt on Paul, but one that gives him the alien lust for murder, which makes him attack his Swedish girlfriend, Marta. All the while, the boys from Mission Control are on the chase, as is the sheriff, played by the skipper from Gilligan's Island. But whatever. Eventually, the hand is dead. Paul is subdued and brought back to normal. But not before the alien has infected a cat, which has begun attacking other cats. To be continued?
The world may never know. Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, in the prologue, Joel enters in a smoking jacket and is greeted by applause from the studio audience. No, Season 1 isn't weirder than you remember. Cambot just added canned claps to Joel's entrance before he reminds viewers about the show's premise. After the break, the invention exchange begins with a bit of a body horror theme. Joel offers up a safety saw that shuts off when your fingers are too close to the blade. A good idea, but Joel can't resist pulling a prank on the Mads and pretends to have an accident using some fake fingers and a sleight of hand. In Deep 13, Dr. Forrester stretches Dr. Earhart's left arm out to Stretch Armstrong lengths. Dr. F seems happy with the results, though Dr. E is in agony. In segment 2, the bots don't want to play murder ball or rock, paper, scissors with Joel and run away. Crow, always the more obstreperous of the two, even uses a not joke to razz Joel. Like, not. Like one of those? Yeah. Ugh. Anyway, Joel, dejected, confides in Cambot and gets the silent robot who tapes every episode to remind Joel never to create something with free will again. Joel and the bots decide that risk is their business come segment 3, so they decide to mock the halting style of William Shatner as they pretend to be choked by goofy rubber hands affixed to their throats. These hands get put to good use in the following segment, where Joel tries to demonstrate to the bots just how deadly a roving single hand can be. Crow's not buying it, until a giant roving hand sneaks its way onto the SOL and beats him up. In the final segment, Joel gives Tom and Crow ram chips for naming a good thing and a bad thing about today's experiment. Oh, and if you're wondering how the SOL keeps getting letters from viewers, Joel reveals here that the Mads have been faxing them to him. There's some cute drawings of the bots, and a demented-looking drawing of Joel that makes him look like salad fingers. Back in Deep 13, Dr. Earhart uses his painfully elongated arms to strangle Dr. Forrester. Well, we did it. This is, I guess, even though you were part of Lords of the Deep, Chris, this is your first go around as co-host proper. I was knitting a sweater for Beth, but I had to finish it for you, so that's why it says Briss on it.
I saw where that joke was going a mile away, and I tried to run.
You're just a man with a very positive attitude towards circumcision.
Ugh, no. Anyway, but it's not dismembered foreskins in this episode. It's a dismembered hand.
Oh, I wish I could watch that.
Well, I'm sure it'll come up sooner or later on Scaritage.
Yes, given the premise of David Cronenberg's Rabbit, it's not that far off.
Oh, speaking of premise, I'm glad they finally explained what this show is about.
Yes, well, they tend to do that, I think, every episode of season 1.
I mean, I don't remember them going into as much detail when we did The Crawling Eye, episode 1 of this season, so it just seems strange. They don't do a good job explaining. I mean, they do a good job in that they get the information across, but they don't do a good job in that it's in no way entertaining.
Yes, because, I mean, the theme song does that in the most entertaining way possible.
Exactly. They've already done that.
Mm-hmm. And the only thing I tend to like about these season 1 explanations of the premise is Joel has a recurring line where he says, I'm subject to a mad scientist's experiment, and in a sense, so are you. I really like that. That's a nice bit of Joel logic that does get lost when we get rid of the premise recap, but it's totally unnecessary. And the whole thing with Cambot adding applause is just this kind of like weird non-joke that goes away, which I think nicely summarizes this episode.
Exactly. Is this the worst episode of MST3K?
I don't know, because I want to say the worst episode of MST3K is irritating and dated in bad ways. Like stuff that makes the show seem ugly. Like, remember when we watched The Leech Woman and there's like that weird, it's like, I come from the transgender society joke and things like that. I think that's worse. Whereas this is just a bad episode of the show. And I will say this, I was more entertained by this than I was Lords of the Deep. I've got to give it credit. This was my bête noire. Both Beth and I recoiled at the thought of doing this episode at various points of It's Just a Show's run. And now that I like finally sat down and watched it for the first time since it was on VHS, I have to say it's like, okay, it's not good, but I laughed a couple of times, which is more than I remember doing.
So I'm looking here at that list that our good friend Jim Vorel put out, where he ranked all of the episodes of the show right around when the new episodes started coming out. And out of the 197 he was looking at the time, this one comes in at 185.
Wow.
So pretty far down. The only ones that are worse than it that we've done are Hamlet, which is at 189, and The Crawling Eye at 193.
Oh, The Crawling Eye's way better than this.
Well, yeah, the worst one, he puts the worst one as Robot versus the Aztec Mummy.
Okay.
Which might be true. Also, 194, just below The Crawling Eye, is Red Zone Cuba.
Okay, that's crazy. Red Zone Cuba is one of the best episodes.
Well,
what are you saying?
Yeah, I agree. This is probably not the worst episode ever, but it is really hard to get through and really dull and flat and boring.
And what's weird is that I would say that this is not the worst episode of MST3K, but Chris, I do consider it to be like one of the most inauthentic episodes, if you know what I mean.
I don't. Tell me what you mean.
Well, what I found when I finally sat down and watched it, and perhaps this is why it's so bad, because The Crawling Eye was not a particularly bad episode. It was all right, and considering where it is in the history of the show, it's pretty dang good. And Robot Monster was a genuinely like great episode, especially for season 1. So why is this one so clunky if they're already kind of good at it at this point, you know? And I think I figured it out watching it, which is that so much of the episode, they seem to be running away from the movie.
Yes. This was my theory as well. That one of the things that's really frustrating about this episode is that much of the riffing has nothing to do with the movie. It feels completely disengaged from the movie.
Yes, and there's a lot of things this, because here's the thing. The Crawling Hand, while not a movie I would recommend you watch unmisted.
Have you tried?
No, but I think I'm good.
Okay.
I think I'm good. There's so much that you can work with. Like, this would actually be, had this been done the following season, it would have been great, I think. And there's lots to work with, like the constant presence of a certain pop song, the ending, which is so laughably goofy, and they don't say anything about it. You know, where a box gets opened and the end rushes towards the screen, and they don't do anything. They walk out.
Yeah.
And it's such a waste. And there's like funny stuff and interesting stuff that's like happening in the movie, and they don't do anything with it. They seem to be, if this were KTMA and they were making this sort of like detached riffing small talk that they seem to be doing, I would understand. But this is scripted MST3K. And for listeners who haven't watched this episode in a long time, imagine if Mitchell, remember how there's that great joke in Mitchell where Mitchell's asleep in the car and the police are driving down to the John Saxon murder that opens the movie. And Crow has a riff of, it's like, Dr. Detroit with songs by Devo, Cutting Crew, and Haircut 100. What if the whole episode was just riffs about soundtracks and Dr. Detroit and they never comment on the action of Mitchell in any way? Imagine how frustrating that would be. And you've got the crawling hand.
So I also want to say, like, it's a season 1 episode where they're still figuring out what it means to write this show and what this show should be like. And it feels like this is an experiment in what their position in relationship to the movie should be. Mm-hmm. And it didn't work out. And, it's fine. Like, they needed to have room to fail, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that this makes for particularly rewarding watching, 30 years on or however long it's been.
No. And in fact, I would recommend this one only to MST3K academics like ourselves. Because I think that there is something interesting in how this episode fails.
Yes.
And that is of itself really curious and bizarre and unusual. So if you're the kind of gourmand who likes to eat things that are unpleasant or try things that are potentially like really horrible just to experience a brand new flavor and understand that flavor and kind of unpack that mentally, that's what you have here. You have black licorice and cloves.
Which is all right, if you like it.
Sure.
I agree. And in fact, I'm just now thinking about the other side of that, which so to speak, which is Hamlet, which they did in what they then understood to be their last season. Mm-hmm. And it's another one where they just kind of change the rules of engagement for an episode. And they do it much better, I think, than they do this time, of course. But it's another very contentious episode for a lot of people. But it really does mix up the formula a bit.
And that is what makes Hamlet interesting, was like it being a valiant attempt. You appreciate it for what it's trying to do, whereas the Crawling Hand just seems like a misfire. It seems like everyone forgot how to do the show.
Yeah. Anyway, what did you think of the sketches?
The sketches are also surprisingly weak. The closest laugh I had is I genuinely enjoyed Joel's invention exchange. I did like that. And there was something refreshing about the end where the decidedly more sniveling and pathetic Dr. E from season 1, who seems so different from his KTMA incarnation, gets revenge and one-upmanship on Dr. Forrester for the first time, I think, ever. And possibly ever again. Possibly it's his only time. That was at least interesting. It's like, oh, that never happens. That'd be like Frank beating up Dr. F. That just never happens in season 1.
Yeah. I also enjoyed some of the sort of character building that we got at the end of the bowling sketch, at the end of the sketch where Joel is trying to cajole the bots into playing games that he will win. And they're like, no, that's not fun. We're going away. And he jokes about how next time I build a robot, I shouldn't give it free will. But it's it's an interesting moment in the arc that develops over the first couple post KTMA seasons of Joel becoming a better dad and the kids growing up.
Yes, that's true. And it's nice that we get that moment from Crow, since Crow, when we first meet him in the very earliest KTMAs, is a subservient bot that ends his phrases with "Yes, Joel Hudson."
Yes. Well, I'm done dumping on this episode.
We found some positive things to say about it. The most feared episode.
We did. We each get a RAM chip.
Yeah.
70,000.
Push that, and he's an astronaut.
This is a movie, as we said, in which an astronaut goes into space and something terrible happens to them.
My favorite episode, Monster A Go-Go. I'm glad we decided to watch it and talk about it.
This is Monster Go-Go is also a very dreary movie.
Yes.
It's definitely a drearier movie than this. It's maybe not as dreary an episode.
No, it's definitely not as dreary an episode. I love that episode, but what a film that is, where it's a complete train wreck.
Absolutely. So this movie comes from 1963, and that is when the space program, and both in the US and the USSR, were both, gearing up. Space exploration was known to be a very dangerous thing. There had been one cosmonaut who died during training, but no one had yet died in space. And certainly no one had yet died in space, taken over by an alien life force that was intent on murder for no clear reason. So it's interesting that this film is exploring what might happen and some of the potential risks that we might encounter when we finally reach space.
And there's a touch in this movie and a couple of movies like it, where there's a touch of the Lovecraftian in the sense that space is the unknown, and everything that could possibly exist in space will harm us, and we can't comprehend why. And that certainly seems to be the case of the bizarre affectation that happens. It gives the one astronaut we see like some cool eyeliner, and it makes his hand alive and murderous.
The makeup in that scene is amazing.
Yeah.
He's just there in the TV screen communicating with mission control. It's all black behind him. He doesn't seem to be in a spaceship. He just seems to be a talking head. And he's got thick eyeliner on and crazy hair. Joel and the Bots make a riff comparing him to Robert Smith from The Cure, and it's fantastic. And he says, "Kill me."
It's the closest thing we've come to. But what if Boy George was in space?
I'd watch that movie.
Yeah, that sounds perfectly lovely. But then it just peters out because there's only so much that a hand can do, which is the few times they're engaging with the material, there's some decent jokes, like when Joel says that the best way to potentially trap the hand is by luring it somewhere with a bunch of hand cream. But I found it kind of interesting that the hand and the sort of spreading of the sickness is killed off by fever, much like the aliens in War of the Worlds are killed by the common cold, and that's clearly a direct ripoff of that.
Right. Yeah, it's not a very satisfying ending.
No.
But we were never going to get one of those from this movie.
No.
What is your favorite Terrors of Space movie in the pre-Apollo 13 era?
Well, I've always really liked the writings of Nigel Neal, and he wrote the original television scripts and the film adaptation script for the Quatermass Experiment, one of his most famous stories. It started off as a BBC serial, and then it became a Hammer film in 1955. I haven't seen the British series. I understand that some, if not all, of the episodes are wiped, but a film version exists. And Chris, it's a curious thing where everything is great except the lead.
Oh.
Yes, to attract American eyeballs and American funding, they got an American actor named Brian Donlevy, who it's reputed that he was a mean alcoholic, and it reeks on the screen because he is just slurring his lines and is barely present. But he's, of course, the great scientist Quatermass, and the premise of that is the British rocket group have sent up a rocket into space with 3 astronauts in it. It returns. Only one of the astronauts returns alive, or indeed at all, and he's behaving very strangely. And then madness occurs, and this results in a really tense, very well-made movie that inspired several other serials and a couple of other film adaptations from Hammer.
Huh.
They eventually replaced the Quatermass actor, and they got a good actor in the form of Andrew Keir.
Now, we talked about the Quatermass Experiment way back in episode 1.
Oh, wow.
So those of you who have rejected the sound of my voice and are just starting over again with more Beth episodes are probably also listening to Adam talk about the Quatermass Experiment. I still haven't watched it in those 2.5 years.
Well, you have so many options. You have so many options because you could watch whatever surviving footage there is of the BBC serial. You could watch the movie, or you can watch the 2005 BBC adaptation of it, which they decided to shoot the same way they shot the original series, so it was done as live.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's always fun.
Yeah, so it was interesting. From what I understand, a few flubs did indeed make it onto the air.
That's fine.
Yes, but it was just shot as live, and they did as much kind of like digital work, kind of in advance as they could. From what I understand, I still haven't watched that one yet, and I'd be curious to hear anything about it. But yeah, watch the Quatermass Experiment if you want to see a good version of Monster a Go-Go.
I just looked up Brian Donlevy in on the Wikipedia, source of all podcast information.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know who his final spouse was?
I'm going to say a young, vivacious lady by the name of Mamie Van Doren.
Oh, close. It's a young, vivacious woman named Lillian Lugosi.
What?
Yep. He married the widow of Bela Lugosi.
Ironically, Brian Donlevy's final words to her were bleh.
Did he just offer his hand in marriage?
Well, not exactly his hand.
So with this movie, I'm impressed that they resisted the urge not to give it the tagline of the film that really hands it to you. But this is indeed a killer hand movie, a disembodied hand movie, and a killer hand movie. And I have a feeling I know what the answer is, but Chris, how much have you experienced in this little subgenre, of which there is a surprising number of films and TV shows that fall into it?
There sure is. I was trying to remember the answer to that very question because it felt like I had seen some, not as much as I'm sure you have, but it felt like a familiar trope. And so I was trying to find a good list of movies and such with disembodied hands in them. And it turns out, like, there's a checkbox on IMDb for that. And it turns out I hadn't seen any of them, except this one. Because I never watched the Addams Family movies, but I certainly have seen the TV show enough. So,
well, that counts.
Yeah. So mostly I think of the disembodied hand as a charming figure, and not on a murderous rampage to give the ultimate hand job.
Yes. Well, I mean, I would hate to think of being on a murderous rampage and give the ultimate hand job because someone's getting their dick ripped off, Chris. That ain't going to be me. Oh man. Yes, this is something that I have always found to be very charming and quaint, and I have two films that qualify as favorites for this for very different reasons.
Which one are you going to hand the Palme d'Or to?
Oh well, the Palme d'Or would have to go to Sam Raimi's Evil Dead 2 from 1987.
Okay,
which. It's not about a killer hand, but a killer hand makes up a big part of the movie's 85-minute running time. The invisible demons that, of course, have plagued Bruce Campbell throughout all of Evil Dead 1 are indeed still at the cabin, just as he is, and while they can't possess him for convoluted reasons, they can possess his hand.
Okay.
So you get, and this is one of the reasons why I love it so much, you get Bruce Campbell pretending to fight his own hand, but his hand keeps attacking him. So you have Bruce Campbell throwing breakaway dishes and a breakaway bottle at his face, and that's really funny.
Yep.
You have Bruce Campbell punching himself, and that's really funny.
Does he tickle himself?
He doesn't tickle himself, but he does attempt Three Stooges moves on himself.
Oh, good.
He flips himself over.
Okay.
It's all done in one shot, so he takes himself by the scruff of his neck and does a flip.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really great. And because that's as far as you could really just take filming a man literally beating himself up, Campbell's character eventually cuts his hand off and he places it in a bucket, and he covers the bucket with a bunch of books. The main one at the top is, of course, A Farewell to Arms.
Oh, so good. So good.
But the hand gets away.
Of course.
And this leads to a cat and mouse game in which Bruce Campbell is trying to one-handedly shoot his own severed hand,
Mm-hmm.
which keeps running away and outwitting him.
He knows all his tricks.
Yeah. He knows where that hand has been because he's taken that hand there.
Does this all happen to like old-timey piano music, like it was the silent, like a Buster Keaton film?
Not quite old-timey piano music, but there's some excellent use of comedy clarinets on Joseph Loduca's score.
Sweet.
And it really does become a cat and mouse game because the hand hides in a mouse hole and even quote unquote steps into a mouse trap.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
good.
Oh, and it makes squawking noises the way that Woodstock did in the old animated Peanut specials once it's severed.
Out of what? Out of its wrist?
Well, there's a hole in the hand where Bruce Campbell stabs it at one point, so maybe that becomes kind of a little mouth for him.
Oh my god. Does this one also get attacked by a cat? As in today's movie?
No. And I was really expecting to see a cat with glowing eyes at the end of today's film, and boy, was I disappointed.
Came pretty close, but yes.
I will say this. That's something I do have to praise the movie for, in that sort of weird, incredible melting man kind of way, where the monster of today's movie was just eaten by cats.
Yes.
How often does that happen? But yes, I would give the Palme d'Or, as I said, to Evil Dead 2. Now, the film that deserves the Golden Turkey Award or the Golden Raspberry or whatever is going on for
the Golden Hand Turkey.
Yes. Oh dear. Well, that's of course, that's an easy way to draw a Thanksgiving turkey. That's perfect.
Yeah.
But that would go to a very early Oliver Stone film starring Michael Caine called The Hand.
Okay.
Caine, if memory serves, it's been a few years since I've seen it, but Caine is an illustrator. He's a comic book artist. And his hand gets severed in a comical car accident. And he becomes convinced that his hand is out there killing his enemies. Which, of course, it might be. I dare not reveal the hand. But the hand...
No spoilers for the hand, please.
Yes. Well, I cannot play my hand, Chris.
Okay. Keep it close to your chest.
Yes. But what I found is that a description of the hand would make it sound like a by-the-numbers horror film. And indeed, the script is just that. It is no different than The Hands of Orlac, of which there have been many adaptations of that story, one of which was filmed with Donald Pleasance and Christopher Lee.
I was going to say, I think you've mentioned that one before.
I did. That's why it didn't qualify for the Palme d'Or. But the execution of it, where Oliver Stone has this overblown style, even early in his directorial career, that it really does not lend itself well to horror. It would lend itself extremely well to horror comedy, as it inadvertently does in the case of this film. It's 90 minutes of laughs. Either way, you're going to be like laughing and entertained, but at least with Evil Dead 2, it was totally intended from the start.
So here's my question to ask you, the connoisseur of handy films. In this film, the hand, the physics of the hand is much more like a hand that, you're just not seeing the rest of the person holding the hand, so to speak, than it is a disembodied hand trying to make its way through this rough old world.
Yeah, you never get a sense that it's like a little creature.
Yeah, it doesn't have its own gravity. It climbs up the straight end of a banister. It doesn't make any sense that it should be able to do that. And I'm not trying to nitpick a stupid horror movie. I'm just curious whether the other horror movies that have had disembodied hands do a better job of giving the hand its weight.
Oh, absolutely. As I said, with Evil Dead 2, it's almost like a superpowered mouse, but it is indeed more animal than hand at that point. And that's one of the things I like about it, is that I love the way the hand scurries around in Evil Dead 2 is so well realized, and again, is done in a cartoonish style, right down to the point of there are specific moments where the music gets very, very Carl Stalling-y. And I love that touch, but it's brilliantly thought through.
And don't let her come back!
Think he's been watching James Dean movies, you guys?
No.
Well, I guess it's time to come back to the five and dime, Jimmy Dean.
I guess we actually have to talk a little bit about this movie before running away from it again.
The way that Joel and the Bots did.
Exactly. Yeah, we're taking a lot of inspiration from them this time. So our hero is compared to James Dean a few times. He looks a little bit like James Dean. And he acts a little bit like James. He's clearly inspired by the James Dean, Marlon Brando school of really acting a lot. Now, it's one of those weird things when you watch this kind of acting from this time period, because I get the sense that people took it to be a really fresh mode of acting. And so you've got these like angsty young men who emote a lot. And this seemed exciting and fresh and like it showed something true about young men's lives. And yet when I watch it now, it looks incredibly fake and artificial and just sort of disgusting to look at. Do you know anything about what the heck happened here?
Well, as far as I can tell, what we have here with Rod Lauren, born Roger Strunk.
Oh.
Yeah, I really wish he'd kept his name, because like I have no patience for Rod Lauren, but I would gladly see a Roger Strunk picture. And it was kind of interesting. So part of the reason why I think he's acting this way is his background. He's a crooner.
Oh.
Yeah. He had kind of, failed to become a big deal. Like he was heavily promoted because he signed with RCA Victor. And so there was like a time, there's that joke on The Simpsons where like Mickey Rooney is the biggest star from like 1939 to 1940. Yes. And that's the case with Lauren, where he's the biggest star from 1959 to 1960. The RCA really tried to promote a hit of his called If I Had a Girl, which I don't think anyone has ever heard of.
I'm going to listen to it right now.
Yeah, put it on.
I've never heard that, but it sounds like every other terrible song from the 50s.
Yeah, it does not exactly stand out.
No, it doesn't.
The thing with him is that I think that because he was supposed to be this youth star, this pop idol, that they thought, oh, wow, we could get this guy to be the same kind of sensation that James Dean is with young people, where he can represent that kind of youthful male anger that some people found sexually appealing or that some people found relatable, depending on viewers.
Right.
But the thing with James Dean is not only was James Dean that guy, but James Dean made, 5 movies?
Something like that, yeah.
Before he died. So You can't really get sick of James Dean because there's not a lot to get sick of.
I suppose so. But also, that all happened, like James Dean died 8 years before this film was released.
True. Well, that's just it, where James Dean was kind of an artist exploring his on-screen persona. People just kind of copied it and didn't innovate or change it in any way. I mean, you could argue that Marlon Brando certainly comes from the same school, and I think that's the real problem. Is that with Dean and with Lauren and with Brando, is that you're never watching a character; you're watching an actor, not ham. Because watching an actor ham is one of the best pleasures
right.
Of all. I mean, honestly, if you get a really good stage actor and you just say, all right, I want none of this scenery left when you're done.
Right.
Then you'll get something really great.
You'll get Donald Pleasance.
Yeah, yes. When all else fails, he still has ham in his back pocket. He can ham if the script is terrible. And boy, did he ever. But with these sorts of performances, they just seem indulgent, and they really seem to go out of their way because they're so like, look at me, I'm such an impassioned young rebel, without a cause, you might say, that it takes away from the other actors who, before we get more into them, I think they're all fine. Like, I even think that Alan Hale, who is best known, of course, as the skipper from Gilligan's Island, he's totally fine. He's perfectly well cast.
Yeah. And
he delivers a competent performance. And in fact, everybody else does. Nobody is out of place except for Rod Lauren.
I suppose so. I definitely agree that the other actors are all competent too. Terrific. And the terrific one goes to Arlene Judge, who plays landlady Mrs. Hotchkiss.
Yes.
Who is delightful. And oh boy, she's got this weird Nancy Walker energy, and it's fantastic. I don't think she had a lot of other screen roles, but boy, she deserved more.
Yes, she comes from a long line of horror movie comical landladies.
That's true too. Who will die, I suppose.
Oh man, if they don't just disappear without explanation, depending on the script.
But yeah, everyone else is. I mean, it's what I expect from a '50s movie. But yeah, when he's given more and more excuses to chew the scenery as he's being taken over by the alien life form, it's
brutal.
It's just awful.
Yeah. There's some curious things about Rod Lauren after the fact. So you ever wonder what happened to this guy?
Nope.
Ah, well, then I won't say another word.
Is it good?
I mean, it's not good.
Oh, is it really bad?
It's kind of bad, yeah.
All right, let's hear it.
So, he does some other things, but it's not great. And one of his last movies is by John Derek, so it's not good.
Okay.
But then he marries
Mrs. Lugosi.
Oh man, boy, the Lugosi's are the marrying kind. No, he fell under the spell of Anita Blanca, who was an entertainer in the Philippines. So he became a part-time resident of Manila.
Huh.
And that seems like, then maybe they lived happily ever after. And Miss Blanca had a mysterious death.
Oh.
And Lauren wasn't found guilty of any crime. But it's sketchy, and he immediately comes back to the United States, where he lived in his final years. So possible murder?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh, and then he committed suicide.
Yes.
Well, that's deeply unpleasant. So I want to talk about James Dean some more
because he had a happy end.
Yeah, exactly. What's your take on him? Are you a fan of any of his 3 movies?
What was it? Giant and Rebel Without a Cause and
East of Eden.
Oh, right. God, I've seen Giant like ages ago, and same with Rebel. I remember thinking like he was fine, and he was like the best at that, but it was like not my cup of tea. As I said, it's like that sort of acting seemed to value one actor over all else, and it treated an actor like a virtuoso rock star.
Yeah,
which actors are not, unless they're Donald Pleasance.
So I just finally got around to watching Rebel this morning.
Oh,
it's the only one of those movies I've seen, and one of the interesting things about it is that it does seem like James Dean, Natalie Wood, and Sal Mineo are all acting in completely different schools of acting.
Yeah, they would.
He's doing the James Dean thing. She is doing this very old school. She's been in a few studio movies. She knows how to hold her body and do things, and she's very much in that role. And then Sal Mineo is doing a fantastic performance. There's very subtle things going on there where he's mostly just hiding in the background and just looking longingly at James Dean, and it's very good. Also, the cause is pretty clear. It's toxic masculinity. Like, duh.
Oh, well, I thought the cause was, what have you got?
Well, that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think what listeners should really take from this is that if you're going to rebel responsibly, and do it with some semblance of subtlety. My God.
Hey, everybody! It's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 doomed moon missions to bring back dangerous facts about the crawling hand. Go, Adam, go!
Did The Crawling Hand feel like an episode of Breaking Bad to you, or, at the very least, that episode of Seinfeld with Tim Whatley, the dentist who converts to Judaism for the jokes? It shouldn't. Crawling Hand co-writer Joe Cranston is indeed the father of Breaking Bad star and Seinfeld guest star Bryan Cranston. But that sort of thing ain't passed on genetically, man.
A young Burt Reynolds screen-tested twice for the lead role, and was ultimately rejected for being too wooden. Maybe Burt should have worn his trademark funny hat.
Allison Hayes makes a brief appearance as Donna, the woman transcribing all communication between this movie's stand-in for NASA and the doomed astronaut in the prologue. Hayes is well known to B-movie fans for a much larger part, playing the title role in 1958's Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. Hayes also appeared in misted Roger Corman films The Undead and Gunslinger.
Siri Steffen, who plays our hero's Swedish girlfriend Marta, was billed on the Crawling Hands posters as, quote, the sex iceberg, a weird nod to the former Miss Iceland's heritage.
An extra scene was filmed with Steffen in the nude. Steffen didn't want to do the scene, but they talked her into it. The scene was reportedly used in foreign markets, but director Herbert L. Strock has said that it was never used at all. Either way, super classy stuff there from The Crawling Hand.
Herbert L. Strock's directorial efforts run dry after The Crawling Hand, which is the last feature he has sole credit on. Strock co-directed the blaxploitation film Brother on the Run in 1973, and did some additional and sometimes uncredited directing work on 2 films from 1980, Monster and Witch's Brew.
Strock's greatest successes were in editing. I mean, yes, he edited The Crawling Hand, but he deserves kudos for cutting the cult hit Donovan's Brain, and, according to the IMDb, doing some uncredited editing work on Herc Harvey's celebrated Carnival of Souls.
The Utter McKinley Strother Mortuary, where Kern and Whitesburg view the body of Mrs. Hotchkiss, either is or is named after the mortuary where the funeral of Bela Lugosi was held in 1956.
Joel sees the doomed astronaut's head communicating via a TV set and quips,
Max Headroom's dad.
as a computer program, Max Headroom has no biological father, but there are 2 men who made Max Headroom. Max is Schrodinger's son, as he has both no dads and 2 dads at the same time. In both the Channel 4 Max Headroom pilot and its subsequent ABC series, Max is the unleashed id from the mind of a reporter named Edison Carter. Like Max, Carter's also played by Matt Frewer. Carter's brain was uploaded and digitized by a whiz kid named Bryce. In reality, Max still has 2 dads and a mom, George Stone, Rocky Morton, and Annabelle Jinkle.
There is a song on this soundtrack, and that song is the Rivingtons' Bird is the Word, which is not to be confused with the Rivingtons' other hit, Papa Mau Mau.
Or maybe you should confuse them. The Trashmen did just that with their surf rock mashup of the 2 songs, Surfin' Bird.
Oh, well, everybody's heard about the bird. The bird's a winner. Well, a bird.
The Trashmen didn't realize they were mashing up 2 songs by the same band. To them, the songs were just in the air, ready for the taking. But the threat of a lawsuit quickly settled the matter.
One of the few things I liked about this film are the very 50s opening credits and their stark typography. Joel makes a joke about the font choice.
Hey, Joel, did they do these titles on a typewriter?
No, that's the Helvetica constellation we're looking at.
Oh.
But of course, the typeface that was used there looks nothing like Helvetica. Now, Joel, you're looking at big, beautiful Clarendon.
The Crawling Hand takes place in Palms, California. A wasted opportunity not to call this one Palms, the Hands of Fate.
And that's time.
Hands so young looking. Mrs. Berg, I thought you were Dale.
Adam, who's Dale?
I thought you were Dale. The Dale sketch, everybody.
Oh no, Mrs. Clark.
So yes, this was a common thing on MST3K, and it was one of those things that I thought I had learned through osmosis, but it's sort of interesting because I learned something wrong the first time the show has ever led me astray.
Oh.
Which is that every time there'd be a close-up on a hand, and this is the first episode to do it, Natch, because it's The Crawling Hand. Whenever there'd be a close-up on hands, you'd often hear the riff, "Oh, I thought you were Dale." And the way this plays out is kind of interesting, and is I think one of the few times that a riff is just based on something that the entire Best Brains writing staff misremembered at once. They thought it was a Palmolive commercial.
You're soaking in it.
Yeah. But that's the commercial they're thinking of. They're thinking of Eusokia. There's no "I thought you were Dale."
So who's Dale?
The "I thought you were Dale" comes from Grape Nuts cereal. And I believe that eating grape nuts will give you such shiny teeth and a healthy coat and all that you can be mistaken for your own daughter. Hence, "I thought you were Dale."
Oh, no, Mrs. Bird.
Don't worry about it, Dad.
I thought you... you were Dale.
Dale's my teenage daughter. We're often confused.
Even though this riff, I think it had kind of been buried as time went on, perhaps not to remind themselves of the crawling hand, and then it resurfaced. It dug itself up from out of the dirt and started showing up as of season 8. So you start hearing "I Thought You Were Dale" a lot.
But now it's meta.
What happened was that somebody eventually like emailed Best Brains and asked them, "It's like, why do you keep making that joke? Like, what does that have to do with hands? It's from Grape Nuts." And I believe it was a fan that corrected them. That might be apocryphal. That might just be a myth. But from what I understand, they didn't realize this themselves.
See, fans, this is why we keep telling you to please send in your well actually letters. You too can make a difference.
Well, I have to get ahead of the well actually in this case, because in last episode I had mentioned as part of the Shallow 13 that the Patton score by Jerry Goldsmith was quoted in his subsequent scores for both Gremlins 2, The New Batch, and The Burbs, both directed by Joe Dante.
Okay.
And I was half right. I hadn't listened to the Gremlins 2 score in a long time, but I was like, no, of course it's parodied in Gremlins 2. Gremlins 2 parodies everything. No, Gremlins 2, he extensively parodies his own score for Rambo First Blood Part 2.
Uh-huh.
But not Patton. That's the military thing he keeps quoting and referencing. Now, it's possible that Goldsmith parodied his score for Patton for Looney Tunes Back in Action, another Joe Dante collaboration, but I have not heard the score nor seen the film, so I don't know.
Also, I want to ask you now, because we've brought it up, but the I Thought You Were Dale turns out to actually be from a Grape Nuts ad, and Grape Nuts is a famously contentious cereal product.
Okay.
Have you had Grape Nuts? Are you a fan?
No, I mean, is Grape Nuts just like raisins and like oat bran?
There's no grapes.
Oh.
There's no grapes and there's no nuts.
What the hell is it?
Good question. It's very hard.
No, okay. This sounds like the Canadian cereal Oatmeal Crisp.
Yeah, it's hard. Well, all right. So you know how Oatmeal Crisp, which is also available in the States, as I recall, you know how when you eat it, it kind of tears the roof of your mouth up?
Mm-hmm.
Grape Nuts does the same thing.
Okay. So it's unpleasant, is what you're saying.
It is famously unpleasant to many people, for it has no flavor and quite an aggressive mouthfeel.
No.
I don't know. I kind of love it, but you know, one of the things that I quite like is that you can get grape nut ice cream.
Okay, but what's the flavor?
I mean, cereal,
but
it's wheat, malted barley flour, salt, and dried yeast are the ingredients. It doesn't have a strong flavor. It just tastes of cereal. But grape nut ice cream has the sort of those little shards of wheat and barley mixed in with like vanilla ice cream.
Okay.
And it says here that it's a popular dish in the Maritimes, Jamaica, and New England, and the Shenandoah Valley.
Grape nuts, huh?
Grape nut ice cream.
Wow. I've never been tempted, and no one has ever offered, so I cannot give an informed opinion on grape nuts ice cream.
So we're watching this episode in part because it is the spooky month, and this is a spooky movie about a spooky hand doing spooky murders.
Yes, that's the great part about doing Halloween specials for this podcast, is that we get to pretend that MST3K doing horror films is somehow special or unique.
Well, we try to save the spookiest ones, I guess. I mean, what did we do last year? We did...
that's what I'm trying to think. We did Zombie Nightmare first.
We did Melting Man.
Oh, right! Which does feel fitting, especially because The Incredible Melting Man was a great 70s Halloween costume.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, we did Zombie Nightmare the first year. And so which of these three movies is the spookiest? Which one makes you want to dress up as it for Halloween?
I mean, that goes without saying, Melting Man. although I would do, and would certainly give kudos to anyone else who did, dress up as the bizarre not Columbo coroner from Zombie Nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
That's a very specific Halloween costume that, in the words of Joel Hodgson, the right people will get.
Similarly, I now want to dress up as Mrs. Hotchkiss, the landlady from this movie.
Ooh.
That would be fun. Constantly getting out of bed, finding my gun, getting back into bed, getting out of bed, finding my gun again, pouring myself a drink, getting back into bed. What I'm saying is I don't leave the house for Halloween.
Oh, I thought you were going to do a big prop bed that you take with you.
Oh, I could.
Yeah, this could be an art project.
No, I'm sort of famously not into Halloween, not into dressing up for Halloween, not into other people dressing up for Halloween. It's vaguely, I mean, I can deal with it, but I find it vaguely upsetting.
Why is that?
I don't know. I'm just, we're all broken in different ways. This is one of the ways I'm broken, that I don't like it when people dress up. When maybe it's because I grew up in an area where there was a lot of sort of pranking that went on Halloween, and I was, in buses and such that got pelted with eggs too often. But it doesn't take me to my happy place. I totally not trying to down anyone who is into it. I'm just gonna
Don't costume shame.
Yeah, I'm not trying to. I know if you want to do it, that's cool. I'm just going to stay in my basement.
Fair enough. But Halloween is very important to me. I guess because very few people, I find, dress up to show off some part of their personality that isn't horror based. They're almost drawn to dressing up in ways that reference horror media of some kind. And so for the build up to Halloween, the associated Halloween parties, and the day itself, everybody is celebrating horror. Everybody is. And it's the one time of year where like everybody seems to see the world the way I see it. So there's something kind of sweet about it for me.
And I also have to ask your other podcast, a part of our Scaritage, your guide to Canadian horror films. Are you and Sarah doing anything particularly fun for the spooky day?
Yes, we are. So our pre-Halloween episode was on the David Cronenberg film about a penis that lives in an anus that lives on an armpit of a porn star that goes around hugging people until they die.
Still not convinced that this is a real film.
It's a real film, I promise. David Cronenberg made it, and I wouldn't make up things about him.
No.
So that's what's weird. It's a very bleak movie, but when you think about it later, it's a very fun and silly movie. And Sarah and I will be discussing its remake by the flashy and very stylish filmmaking duo, the Soska sisters.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Have you seen it yet?
No. Neither Sarah nor I have had a chance to sit down and watch Rabid 2019, but we're looking forward to it.
Does it take place many, many years later?
Well, it takes place in the far-flung future of now.
No. Oh, that's the most horrible setting of all.
Yes, I can say, Rabid 2018 would perhaps also be horrifying, but man, Rabid 2019, whew, bleak stuff.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you want to tell us about your MST3K themed Halloween costume, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, and we're on Twitter at itisjustashow. We would love to hear from you. The show is made possible by listeners just like you. For as little as $1 an episode, you can help us research and record this show, and you can listen to all of our superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow, and thank you if you do. And if you want to follow up on anything we mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes, which should be in your podcast app, but you can also find them at itsjustashow.com/episode/58.
Well, I say hands up, no more, stop, surrender. We cannot discuss the crawling hand for a single moment longer. Chris, what are we going to be looking at next time on It's Just a Show?
This doesn't make any sense, this bit, now that I'm host and producer. So maybe we need to spend a little time retooling a few things. I suspect that we're going to have a technical difficulties episode that'll be something simple and special for everybody, and then we'll come back strong around Turkey Day. And heck, why not? We talked about it earlier. Let's just finally sit down and watch a car drive into a plane as we look at Season 5, Episode 8, Operation 0007.
Hey, it's got 2 7s, but it's 8. How perfect. But yes, this is the episode that makes you want to look at the church and look at the steeple and open the door and go to sleep. As Neil Connery is a hypnotist and an archer and maybe a dentist, I forget, but he's pretending to be his spy brother.
Yes.
Oh, what fun. I remember loving this episode. So I'm looking forward to having an excuse to watch it and talk about it all over again. But until then,
We've had crawling eyes, we've had crawling hands. I can't wait to find out what crawls off me next.
and if you can't afford to support us on Patreon, consider this your 5-finger discount.
Until next time, take it away, Theme Squad. Strock.
Strock, strock, strock.